So now for something quite similar. I will say I thought it was extremely classy you put in Belfast Castle in your presentation. Oop. So. Yes, welcome to Belfast. I hyped it up a lot last year, so hopefully it's lived up to that. Good to have yous, and you've brought some weather with you, which is always good as well. So similar to Namjim, I am making a mobile app for collecting data on arches, a bit more homegrown. So I mentioned how I was going to approach this last year. Basically, my approach is trying to make something very, very simple that can run our workflows for our use case. For anyone who wasn't here, our use case is essentially we have a team of architects and civil servants who look after heritage assets in Northern Ireland. And they typically use these kind of forms to fill in. So if they have an excavation to do, they'll carry out an excavation form. This is their way of working. So whenever we were making their digital transformation towards arches, we decided to make a very, very workflow heavy arches instance because that's similar to how they've been working before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the mobile app, which is called Arches Extrados. I'm going to show you connecting to it, which I don't think people care too much about, but I have a question, which is why I'm bringing it up. I'm going to show saving maps offline because it was a big topic last year. Namjoon actually said at that point about maybe using field maps, which is quite useful. I think Galen told me to grow up and just make a native app. but I'm too stubborn for that. Some basic uses of the workflows, just loading them and sending some data. And then a bit of a higher focus on some of the widgets that have a little bit of extra work in them just to show how they work offline. Namely the resource list, concept lists, and maps again, because we all love maps. And then just show basically how we would do the sync strategy at the end. Ours is quite straightforward. So I'll get on with it. So in architecture, Extrados is the name for the outer curve or the surface of an arch. So you could say it's the outside of an arch. In heritage asset management, Extrados is how you use arches when you're outside. So first, just a quick bit. This is double speed here because no one cares about a login page. But it's completely ripped off of Arches Collector. You add the URL that you want to go to, get nicknames so that you can swap between different Arches instances if you have them, and then you hit save. We go to this applications endpoint, which is had, and as long as we know the client ID, then we can then get a token which allows us to use API endpoints, any endpoint that has the API decorator on it. Something you were able to do in Collector, which I haven't got working myself, but I haven't really spent that much time on it either, is you guys were able to hit this user profile endpoint, and it would give you back any client ID that you, well, unless I've misinterpreted code, it looked like you got back any client ID that user had access to, but I've only ever got an empty string back for it. But again, I just hard-coded it because it's not worth spending any time on. But I thought I would ask that here. So now once we're logged in, I will show my approach for getting the offline maps. Oh, that should be playing. It's not even a live demo, it's messing up. All right. So yes, we go to this map page, and it'll ask us to zoom in. So this just loads up leaflet stuff, and then on the right, so once we zoom in, there's a save icon. When we hit that save icon, anything that is on screen at the moment will be saved at max zoom. And if you're not at max zoom when you press that button, then it will drill down to max zoom for any area there. And then we can see it offline, this neat little Fibonacci pattern that appears, where it kind of drills down into it. So the smallest squares are what we have at max, available to us at max zoom, even when we're offline. And how we've done that, as you can see on the right there, that we've used IndexedDB. And we just store the images that we get from Leaflet as a blob, and we use, quite cleverly, the key is just the URL. And then we make another layer for Leaflet so that if it fails going online to leaflet.org, it checks IndexedDB for the exact same thing. And if we have it saved, then it just works. So here's an example of it on a device that has no cache. I can relate. I think I show it off better than that in a wee second. So yeah, you can see the blue area there where we don't have it saved. Yes, here we go. Here we go drilling in. So you can see that they just start deep here. And as you may have seen there, the offline toggle that shows the blue highlighted area is quite useful just for finding it whenever maybe don't have zoom levels earlier. But usually the cache sorts that out, and we'll see that later on. And this, we're also able to calculate what tiles are needed quite easily, because if you look at the endpoints for OpenStreetMap, you get this section where you got the zoom level. So this is zoom level 0, where there's only one tile of the entire world, and then it's got an x-axis and a y-axis. And then if we go on to the next zoom level, so zoom level 1, then it splits it into 4. And then zoom level 2, it'll then be 16. Each of those tiles will split into 4 again. So basically every single zoom level, you're doubling both axes, which means if we take here for an example, so Belfast Castle, then we're at zoom level 17 here for this tile, 63,000, 41,000, which means if we wanted to work our way backwards, then at 16 we would need to make sure that we had the tile 30,000 and 41,000, and work the other way. So basically you take the tiles, the number you've got here, and you plus or minus it, and make sure that you've got every tile that would include the halved or doubled at each layer beforehand. So it makes that nice little pattern that you saw earlier, and it's quite simple maths. And then just to point out, so we've used OpenStreetMaps. Mapbox uses this exact same thing, so the same tile is the same area. I don't know if it breaches their license to store their stuff because they want to sell you the offline maps, but if it's not against the license, it would be a way you could do that. And there's probably ways you could do this with other map providers as well. I was originally planning on using Mapbox, but we ended up going for OpenStreetMaps for a couple of reasons, but most importantly because someone had already done this work. So we use this for some of the functions that we're using to put them in the IndexedDB. It's dead on. It's a little bit old, and you might need to tweak it a little bit, but it's pretty good. So now onto the gist of it. So as I said, ours is very workflow heavy. So I wanted to be able to imitate as much of our workflows as possible. And if we add a new workflow, I wanted it just to be on the app without us having to redo it. So I didn't want to have to make a new form or have the users make a new form anytime they made a change to the workflows. So so we go to the workflow page, and we've managed to pull that list of workflows from Arches. I've got those using work that my colleague Taylor had done previously for the workflow builder. So he basically made this workflow builder endpoint, and if you've spent any time making workflows, you'll recognize what's coming back here. It's just the JSON that we use to do it. And if you look closer, it's actually, it was funny whenever I was watching Alexis's presentation, I was thinking they've just remade workflows, which is great, and you've made workflows better than they were. Because I saw that you just had the hidden nodes thing, which is something that you can see there we had to implement ourselves. And then eventually when that wasn't enough, we started adding more and more parameters, and we just made this thing called node options, where we can take the node and then put a bunch of things. We can override anything that comes from the graph essentially in it on the fly for different workflows, so different search filters and different workflows, different things like that. So if you're looking for another PR request, I would do it. do workflows next. So in that example there, you can see that we have a component override, which is something that I've done for Extrados. So basically, if there's a component or a data type that we don't have for Extrados, it will just display. Extrados cannot display this. Wait till you get back home for it, because there's a lot of advanced features that we have that don't need to be remade. But if there's something that we do want to display, so we've got a bunch of these different generate numbers where we use different maths in the background and they're different components. So we can say, actually, I want this to be displayed as a text widget and it's got to be an auto-generated text widget, and we handle that in a specific way. And we can, disable and stuff with those node options or make things hidden if we want to. So yeah, we get this, we save that, I should have it here. Oh yeah, Taylor did this, that endpoint. So we save the workflow into the workflow section in our local storage. And then you can see that it's got the titles and the cards there, and then we hit the cards endpoint, which I mentioned there, to actually figure out what the, just to get a value of the node groups that would be on the graph that you're using, and then we can populate the cards with the correct kind of data. So once we do that, we can save, and then we will save the workflow to local storage, like I discussed, and we can create a new resource. What?
Let's see your fast taker.
Drag a few options. So now that we've saved the new one, we can see that we've added that to our local storage as well as a resource. The resources is actually split into 3 keys. You can see 2 of them here. One is workflow, so it's the name of the workflow and then just a list of the names that should appear on that list that's on the screen there. And then the tiles, which actually contains the data for it. We also end up, I think I forget to show it unfortunately, but we also get a search section here, which is resources that we want to have available in dropdowns for resource instance lists. So I kind of show where it's used, but I didn't show the actual JSON key there. So when we open a step then, the code's not particularly important. Basically it loops through what we've got in our local storage for each of the for whatever step you're on. After that, it checks if you've got an outbox, which we'll go into later, and then it will replace the values with whatever's in your outbox, because it's going to assume that that's more up to date and that's what you're intending to send. We loop through each of the cards, which then loops through each of the widgets and figures out what data type they're meant to have. And it's just a switch statement that returns the components that I've made, and it currently supports these components, which is just generic Arches ones with an auto-generated tag at the bottom. You probably can't see it very well on the screens, but that is one of those auto-generated ones. And essentially the way we've done it, instead of having to make any kind of complex auto-generation we've done, we just do Extrados and the name of the workflow that we're on. And you could also do workflow and then step, and then Extrados or Arches will see that it's an auto-generated one, and it'll figure out what to do whenever it gets there. So it's the same, no chance of making mistakes. Yeah, so then we hit save and continue. Or maybe I don't. But if I had hit save and continue, you'd see on the right is what would have happened. An outbox is created into local storage, which is just a tile. And then whenever you hit send, we're just going to loop through those, which I'm about to show. So select it, it loads that, and then it'll go through your outbox for that example, and it will send every tile available. And it'll give you a wee heads up if anything goes wrong. Yeah, so some of the special widgets. And go first with the concepts and resource instance lists. Basically to this, I decided I was just going to treat these as a feed. So I made a feed manager, which does a lot of like the generic stuff. You've got a list, you've got a way of selecting things. You're going to have infinite scroll, you're going to have a search bar, things like that. And then I made a different version for resources and concepts, just changes what endpoints they're hitting, changes how to treat the data based on the shape that you get back from those endpoints. And then for the lists, I just, again, extended their appropriate parent. And then all you have to change is basically change it to deal with arrays instead of direct options. So it's quite straightforward. One of the things we do, again, I did try to make this bigger, so hopefully you can see it. I made the widgets change the text based on their state. So before it's loaded, if you don't have a selection, it's going to let you know that it's still loading the list. So if you tap it, it's going to be empty and not to worry. If you do have a selection and it hasn't loaded yet, it'll tell you how many selections there are that you don't have access to. After it's loaded, it'll tell you either to select or it'll show them. So then whenever you've actually clicked on it, basically the search tab is just goes to the same searches that are same endpoints that the drop downs in Arches use. So you'll be familiar with them. Concepts uses the page drop down endpoint, and resources just uses the search resources. We put the graph and any terms and advanced filters on there. Then if we go to recent, then it'll actually go to our local storage. Whenever we've selected something, I forgot to say, so you can tell if we've selected our archaeological event because it's green. Once we've selected anything, it'll go into our local storage because we want to see that if we're offline. And it also has an extra benefit is that if a user has selected something frequently or they've got options that they tend to do, it'll always be available to them online or offline. So yeah, the recent tab then looks at that instead of trying to search. So if it's in there, it's always there. And then we have some special cases where if we may have some in our local storage but not others. So for historical period there, we can see that the 11th century and something else that's not in our storage is there, and the same on the contacts for the owners. And this bit, actually, I'll just warn you, this bit's going to go fast. So I scroll down, and it's just to show that once we go back online, those lists will then update. And I've got some really helpful arrows. And we use those endpoints at the end there. To actually get them. So ready, steady, up. So you can see what happens. And then once they've been loaded, they get stored into our local storage as well. So that list is growing based on the users, what they're actually selecting. So the map, everyone's favorite. Come on. I seem to be missing the section where I did stuff, but it's dead on. You just know what it's like. Made a clean thing where we can add points, lines, polygons. You just know what that looks like anyway. Just wanted to point out, a lot of people have reservations about map editing on a phone or a device. So use this library TerraDraw because it makes it really straightforward. So basically, all the points that are used in a polygon or line or whatever are represented as those large dots. You can drag those as you would expect, but then in between each of them, it will create a small point, which is ready to become a point. So if you tap that, it becomes a new point, and then you can drag and drop them. And then just to show it again, because it is actually very smooth. If I was as prepared as Namjama would have had a URL, you could have played with it. It's fun. Bit of a stress toy. We also have geolocation stuff, which can even be used offline. So I hit geo there, and it went to my location. I could drop a pin, and it will drop a point in that location, and I can trace a route. So if I start tracing, basically it'll so it's not fully optimized. Basically, anytime it detects that the point has changed, it will create another point in this line. Obviously, that if you've got quite a sensitive phone, that could really drain your battery quite heavily, I guess. It's been fine for what I've been using it for. I assume that that's also fine for what the clients are going to be using it for. And yeah, we can also go on the geo, find our location quickly, and just add using the lines and polygons as well. Try to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible. Hide a bunch of options just to make sure it's like not overwhelming for the users as well. And then using it offline. So I already showed the gist of this, but you can see that there's more sections here that we haven't actually saved. That's just because when you're using the map, it will cache anyway. So the only reason we need to save them is just to be absolutely sure that the most important parts of the map are definitely going to be accessible. Yeah, so this bit, you'll probably not be able to keep up. Are we going to go here? We're going to start? We're going to start? Yeah. So just showing what happens if two people go at the same time. I might skip through bits of it. I was going to rub it in here that Extrados runs a lot faster than Arches, but I'll just leave that bit out. It's because it's pre-saved, so it doesn't have to hit any endpoints. Look at that, it's already got 4 done, you just haven't got 1. Let's skip through these. So sorry, I couldn't show that. Just tight for time. So those changes in the table are what I have made. So we've got 5 conflicts there where we've made changes both on arches at someone's computer and on the phone. For the bibliographic source, on Extrados we tried to change it, but on arches we actually deleted that tile, which is going to create an error, so we'll be able to show you what an error looks like. And then the abstract should be able to send as normal. I'll skip through, apologies for the rush. Come on. I really should have went double speed, but I didn't. Come on. Here we go. Yeah, so basically what we're doing here is every time we hit send, we actually contact the server again with the card endpoint with that resource ID, and then we compare what we have in our local storage, not in the outbox, but in the actual resource, which will be the most recent thing we got from Arches. If there's any difference there, then we flag that up as a conflict. Unless we haven't changed that tile, then we'll just conform to theirs if we haven't made any change there. Because we can see we've got 5 conflicts. Whenever we do them, I wanted to do this as simple as possible again. So we just list what the tiles actually have conflicts at the top. We show them what we changed, and then we just repeat the cards and say, do you want to conform to the fresh data, or do you want to overwrite this change? Either way, what's going to happen is our local storage resource is going to change the most updated arches, but if we hit overwrite, so you can see my options in green there. If we overwrite, then we will also put it back into the outbox, what we wanted to change. Yeah, we bugged there, which I actually didn't have to show because I didn't have time, but oh well. And yeah, if there's errors, it'll give a wee description of the error itself as well. So it says that the resource didn't exist. Come on. Yeah, and then if we go back, then we can see that we have the green values, which are the ones we chose, based on whether we overwrote or conformed to recent. And I quickly just show this. Using Canva, I should have used open source. The values are the same on Arches as well. So yeah, I think I'm out of time there. So thank you. Yeah. Do you have time for questions? Or
Yeah. Next one.
Yeah.
Are there any questions?
That's super cool, Owen. I gather that the tiles you're caching are PNGs. Had you thought at all about vector tiles?
I could, yeah.
It would be pretty much the same thing,
it would
right?
be.
Yeah, but I guess the leaflet would prefer.
Just use it. So yeah, those Mapbox ones, they come back as like the PBF vectors.
Right, exactly.
I haven't tried it, but I would assume that if you expose that content to the Mapbox widget, it would work.
I can say from having done that, thanks. It's a hypocrisy. I can say from having done a separate test, a separate bit of the work, that I was able to get some of that working with flat GeoBuff for caching the vector tiles, which seemed to work quite nicely, and I think Leaflet supports natively, I think. Or no, there's a Leaflet flat GeoBuff, yeah.
So you're just using Leaflet throughout currently as the actual...
The reason I put that Mapbox thing is to show you would be able to do it with anything else as well, and just that, storing the URL that you would expect to find it at in the IndexedDB is quite a clever little solution.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Owen. That was really great. A lot of really good work and thinking there. And for what it's worth, I think starting with workflows as the way of exposing the data entry that's spot on.
Yeah.
You might have shown this, and maybe I just missed it, but I'm curious about the case where you and I both got in the field. You create an instance of a new instance of the model, and I create a new instance of the model. How do I find out that you've done that, and you find out that I've done that?
If the assumption is data doesn't reach Arches until the users hit send. So one user would have to send it up, and then the other person would be able to find it. But I guess one thing with ours is because all of our workflows are openable as well, we can actually search for existing ones. So as soon as you send, I can search for yours, essentially.
But do I have to then request like the latest, so I know if I hit send, it'll go to Arches. How am I made aware that you've done that?
I can show you that if you let me go into quickly some of my, I'll go to, so I'm really sorry, I did a better presentation last week.
On the screen out there.
But it's 25 minutes and I had no technical questions in it. It was for the clients. So I'll find the right place. Creating a new, no, I want to find searching. Added existing, sorry about this. If I had thought I was going to be looking through this, I would have actually bothered doing chapters. Come on. So yeah, we've got these search lists, and as soon as you search, it'll look for the resources endpoint, and it's got the label or the search strings that we want for the correct workflow as well. So as soon as I hit search, that's getting recent data from Arches.
What are you searching there? Are you searching for?
That'll be search resources endpoint, and it's the same for the resource instance lists as well. So as long as you're online and you have access to that search page, you'll get up-to-date data. But if you aren't online, it'll let you know because you won't be able to access the search page. You'll only be able to access your recent, which is stuff that you've already got stored.
And how do you apply? Could I apply geospatial filter? So I'm just searching for stuff near me.
No, I haven't done any of that.
Okay. Still very cool.
Why would I do that? 3 other people in this room have done it.
Maybe a little bit on some of the JS stuff that we've done for geospatial front-end filtering that I was going to pitch tomorrow. So you might be interested in that as well, actually. Sorry. Just
It's all good, yeah.
I guess what question, just based on workloads, what are the kind of constraints at the moment? Is it require a model, workload builder, achieving its only out-of-the-box stuff? There's no.
Oh, you can do some not out-of-the-box stuff, and anything that it panics with, it'll just say Extrados can't display this. So your workflow won't break if you have something complex in it. It just might limit what you can see. I am using one endpoint, so I'm not using this. You wouldn't need the full workflow builder, but I am using the endpoint that Taylor was using to get the shape of the plugin. But I mean that's easy to make as well. You just need something to ship out that JSON configuration. There might actually be an Arches native way to do it, but it was just so since we'd already put the work there to do that, it was simple. So you could either take that from that PR that I mentioned on the presentation, or figure out how to do it properly.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Great. Thanks, Owen.